The doctor told me if my wife didn't get the surgery now, she was going to die. But my mother, who held the debit card to my six-figure salary, refused to release the $25,000 for the hospital fee. "The money has to go to your Uncle Rick first," she said. "He has a cash flow problem." I raced to the bank to freeze the account. The moment I walked in, I saw him, my Uncle Rick, holding my bank card, telling the teller he needed to be added as an authorized user with a $50,000 credit line. I froze, an icy dread washing over me. When Rick saw me, there wasn't a trace of guilt on his face. Instead, a smug grin spread across it. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "What's yours is mine. You should know that by now." I laughed. I didn't argue with him. I just turned around and walked out. I drove to my father's grave, took out my phone, and started a voice memo. In a low, steady voice, I said, "Mom, do you remember how Dad's car crashed all those years ago? The other driver wasn't that Uncle Rick." 0 when I walked out of the bank. The afternoon sun felt like molten gold pouring over the pavement, but I couldn't feel its warmth. The blood seemed to have frozen in my veins. I didn't go home. I didn't go back to the hospital. Chloe was lying in a hospital bed waiting for me, waiting for the money that would save her life. Instead, I got in a rideshare and gave the driver the address of a cemetery on the outskirts of the city. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with a quiet curiosity. I stared blankly out the window as the cityscape blurred past. The noise, the traffic, the river of people. It was all just static. My world had shrunk to a single image. Uncle Rick's greasy, triumphant face at the bank, and the echo of his words, "What's yours is mine." The cemetery was quiet, the only sound the mournful whisper of wind through the pine trees. I stood before my father's headstone, looking at the faded photograph of his kind, honest smile. It was exactly as I remembered. He'd never had a bad word to say about anyone in his life. He was good to everyone, but especially to my mom and her family. He would have given them the shirt off his back. And what did his goodness get him? It got him a brother-in-law who, after his death, felt entitled not only to the life insurance payout, but to every penny his son earned through blood, sweat, and tears. He acted like he was the one who was owed. It got him a wife, my own mother, who would watch her daughter-in-law lie dying in a hospital bed while she planned to give that same deadbeat brother the money needed to save her. Tears I didn't know I was holding back finally broke free, splashing onto the cold granite. "Dad, are you seeing this? This is the woman you loved your whole life. This is the family you always propped up. They're bleeding your son dry, and now they're ready to let his wife die, too." I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my grief hardening into resolve. Crying wouldn't solve a damn thing. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and opened the voice recording app. The red button pulsed like a cold, unblinking eye. Speaking to my phone and to the man in the photograph, I began to talk in a calm, measured tone that felt alien to me. "Mom, you remember how Dad's car crashed all those years ago? The other driver wasn't that Uncle Rick?" The recording was only 30 seconds long, but every word was a razor's edge. When it was done, I didn't hesitate. I opened my texts, found my mom's contact photo, a picture of a lotus flower she loved, and sent the audio file. Delivered. I shut off my phone and shoved it in my pocket. The world went silent. I sat in front of my father's grave for a long time, feeling the chill that had settled deep in my bones slowly recede, replaced by a strange, new sense of calm and determination. Some wounds don't heal. They just fester. It was time to finally cut out the infection. After I don't know how long, I took out my phone again. I didn't turn it on. I swapped the SIM card for a burner I kept for emergencies. I dialed my best friend, Leo. "Leo, I need to borrow 25 grand. It's an emergency." There was no hesitation on the other end. "Text me your account info. It'll be there in 5 minutes." He paused, then couldn't stop himself. "God damn it. Is it your blood-sucking mother and that gambling addict uncle again? Ethan, when the hell are you going to cut them off?" His anger was a warm current in the cold void I was feeling. In this whole damn world, at least one person genuinely had my back. "This time is different," I said quietly. "The game is over." I hung up and texted him Chloe's hospital payment portal information. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a confirmation receipt. The bill was paid. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my pants, and gave my father's headstone one last look. "Dad," I whispered. "Just wait." I walked away from the cemetery and swapped my regular SIM card back into my phone. The moment it powered on, it began vibrating violently, like it was having a seizure. The screen was a nightmare of missed calls and a solid wall of text from my mother. I stared at her icon, a cold smile pulling at the corner of my mouth. "Don't worry, Mom. This is just the beginning." 02 the next time she called, I answered. Her voice, shrill enough to shatter glass, erupted from the speaker. "Ethan, have you lost your mind? What are you talking about? Are you trying to kill me?" Her voice was thick with panic and disbelief. I held the phone away from my ear until the initial hysterical burst subsided. "Whether I'm lying or not, you know the truth better than anyone," I said, my voice flat and empty. My calmness seemed to enrage her further. "What truth? I don't know what you're talking about. You ungrateful child. You get a wife, and suddenly your own mother means nothing. After all I did, raising you by myself, this is how you repay me? You're going to slander your own uncle for an outsider? Are you trying to destroy this family?" It was the same old script, the same tired accusations. I didn't say a word. I just listened. It was the same way she had emotionally blackmailed me my entire life, anytime I dared to push back. Only this time, the words had no power. They were just noise. She must have worn herself out, because her tone softened, cracking into a pathetic sob. "Ethan, honey, who do you think I'm doing all this for? For this family. Your uncle is my only brother. He's all I have left. If something happens to him, how can I ever show my face to my family again?" "Your only brother?" I finally spoke, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is he more important than Dad's life? Is he more important than Chloe's?" The question was a white-hot poker, and it hit its mark. She started stammering. "No, it's not what you think, what happened back then. It was just an accident. A total accident." "An accident?" I cut her off with a bitter laugh. My voice rose, thick with a rage I'd suppressed for years. "An accident where the other driver skips town the next day? An accident where your entire family lines up to feed the cops the same story, that Dad just lost control of the car? An accident that has you funneling my six-figure salary, year after year, into the black hole of his gambling debts? An accident where my wife is lying in a hospital, waiting for $25,000 to save her life, and you're at the bank trying to get your deadbeat brother a $50,000 line of credit on my account." With every question, her breathing grew more ragged. By the end, all I could hear was her desperate, gasping breaths. Then came the complete and utter breakdown, a torrent of gut-wrenching sobs. "Ethan, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please don't do anything crazy. Please. The money, I'll give you the money right now. Is 25,000 enough? I'll give you 50. She was begging now, her voice hollow with fear. She wasn't afraid of me, her son. She was afraid of a 15-year-old case file being reopened. "Too late," I said, my voice cold as steel. "I already borrowed the money. Chloe's surgery is taken care of. No thanks to you." Her sobbing stopped abruptly. I could picture the stunned, panicked look on her face. "We're past the point of talking about money now." I delivered the next sentence slowly, deliberately, making sure every word landed. "And you'd better tell your precious brother to lay low. My patience has its limits." I ended the call, and the world fell silent again. I was standing at the hospital's administrative window, holding the receipt. I walked down the hall to the surgical waiting area. The bench was cold. The air smelled of antiseptic. But for the first time in a long time, my heart felt steady. "Hang on, Chloe. As soon as I'm done with all this, we're starting over." 03. The light above the operating room door was on, a huge red eye staring at me, making my stomach churn. I sat on the vinyl bench, my hands clenched together, my palms slick with cold sweat. Suddenly, a commotion of loud footsteps echoed from the end of the hall, growing closer. I looked up and saw my dear Uncle Rick. He looked like he'd just stumbled away from a poker table. He reeked of stale cigarette smoke and cheap whiskey. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were shot with red. He had two guys with him I didn't recognize, both with the same sleazy, washed-out look. "Ethan," Rick bellowed, storming up to me and jabbing a finger in my face. "You little bastard, you've gotten bold, haven't you? Threatening your own mother. Trying to cut off your uncle. Who the hell do you think you are?" He was spitting as he yelled, the stench of his breath making me want to gag. He swung his hand back to slap me. I leaned back slightly, and his hand sliced through the empty air. He stumbled, catching himself before he could fall. I looked at him, my expression unmoving. This is a hospital. It's not a bar for you to brawl in. If you want to cause a scene, I'm happy to oblige. I'm just not sure how another charge for disturbing the peace will look on your record. My words stopped him cold. He clearly hadn't expected the nephew who had always been his personal ATM to stand up to him. His face flushed, but with his two goons behind him, his bravado returned. He couldn't hit me, so he started playing the victim. Hey, everyone, come and see this. The world's gone crazy, he shouted down the hallway. A nephew who won't even acknowledge his own uncle. I practically raised this kid, and now that he's a big shot making all this money, he's too good for his poor family. His pathetic, screeching voice immediately drew the attention of other patients and families. A nurse hurried over, telling him to keep it down. I ignored his performance and didn't bother explaining myself to the onlookers. I just took out my phone, opened the camera, and started recording his ugly, contorted face. As the nurse approached, I spoke to her calmly. Ma'am, could you please call security? This man is creating a disturbance and harassing patients' families. When Rick saw me recording, his bluster deflated by half. He lunged for my phone. You son of a bitch, are you filming me? Give me that phone. I didn't move. I let him shove me, his grip surprisingly strong on my arm, but I didn't even flinch. I just held the phone steady, raised my voice just enough for the small crowd to hear, and said, Everyone, get a good look. This is my uncle, Rick Vance. He takes my money to fund his addictions, and while my wife is in surgery fighting for her life, he not only refuses to help, he brings his friends to a hospital to assault me. The moment the words left my mouth, the murmurs in the crowd turned to open disgust, all of it directed at Rick. What a piece of trash. His nephew's wife could be dying, and he's pulling this crap? I cut a relative like that out of my life so fast. 2 security guards arrived, looking serious. What's the problem here? Rick was still shouting. He assaulted me. He pushed me. I handed one of the guards my phone. The screen clearly showed Rick shoving me just seconds before. Sir, here's the evidence of him initiating physical contact. I'd like to file a police report. The moment he heard the word police, Rick completely folded. He was a petty criminal, used to bar fights and 5-finger discounts. The last thing he wanted was a formal interaction with law enforcement. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by panic. He pointed a shaky finger at me. You got me. Ethan, you just wait. As the guards escorted him and his buddies away, to a chorus of insults from the onlookers, he scurried off like a cornered rat. I watched him go, my eyes like ice. Wait? Fine by me. I'll wait. I'll wait and watch you walk step by step into the hell I'm preparing for you. Just then, the light over the operating room door went out. A doctor emerged. My heart leaped into my throat. 04 doctor, my wife? How is she? I rushed forward, my voice trembling. The surgeon pulled down his mask, a tired smile on his face. The surgery was a success. She's out of danger and will be moved to a recovery room shortly. You can relax now. My knees went weak, and I nearly collapsed with relief. It was a success. Chloe was okay. An overwhelming wave of joy washed over me. I bowed repeatedly to the doctor, babbling my thanks. Thank you so much, doctor. After I got Chloe settled in her room, she was still sleeping off the anesthesia. Her face was pale, but her breathing was steady and even. I took her hand, which felt cool in mine, and pressed it to my cheek just to feel her warmth, to know she was real. In that moment, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I stayed at the hospital until late, making sure she was stable, then dragged my exhausted body home. When I opened the door, the living room lights were on. My mother, Sharon, was sitting ramrod straight on the sofa. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she'd been crying all day. When she saw me, she started to stand, ready to assert her maternal authority, but my cold stare made her sink back into the cushions. The silence in the room was suffocating. She was the first to speak. She slid a debit card across the coffee table toward me. Here's the card, she said, her voice raspy and pleading. Chloe's medical bills. I'll cover them. 50,000. Is that enough? I walked over and picked up a card. The same card that had been in her possession since I got my first real job. I made 6 figures a year, but I lived like a beggar, having to plead with my own mother for the money to save my wife. The irony was sickening. I didn't look at her. I don't need it. This card and any other credit cards connected to my accounts that you have are now all canceled. As I said it, I dial my bank's customer service line and put the call on speaker. Thank you for calling, Chase. This is Maria. How can I help you? Hello. I need to report all of my debit and credit cards as lost and freeze my accounts, I said calmly, rattling off my social security number. The color drained from my mother's face. Ethan, what are you doing? She shrieked, lunging for my phone. I sidestepped her, my eyes fixed on her. The customer service agent's polite, professional voice filled the silent room. Of course, Mr. Hayes. Let me look that up for you. And sir, can you confirm you want to freeze the supplementary credit card ending in XXXX? I see there was a pending cash advance request on that card yesterday for $50,000, but the transaction was declined due to insufficient funds in the primary account. $50,000. A cash advance. I was stunned. I thought my uncle just wanted a credit card for his expenses. I never imagined he would try to drain the account immediately. $50,000. While my wife was on an operating table, he was trying to bleed another 50 grand for me. I whipped my head around to look at my mother. Her face was no longer pale. It was the ashen gray of death. She was trembling uncontrollably, her lips moving without a sound. She knew. She knew all about it. She probably even approved it. An Arctic chill shot up my spine, freezing the very blood in my veins. Sir? Mr. Hayes, are you still there? The agent asked. I took a deep breath, fighting back a murderous rage. Yes. Confirmed. Freeze everything. Now. And one more thing. I'd like to file a fraud report. I believe someone has been trying to access my accounts without authorization. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the sofa. The living room was dead silent. I stared at my mother, who was shaking like a leaf. I spoke each word with chilling precision. $50,000. Mom, his greed is unbelievable. How much have you given him over the years? 100,000? 200. Her lips trembled as fresh tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't offer a single word of defense. She knew that in the face of a $50,000 fraud attempt, any excuse was meaningless. Looking at her, the last flicker of warmth I felt for her died. From now on, I will only be responsible for your basic living expenses. I'll deposit $2,000 into your account on the first of every month. Don't even think about asking me for a penny more. As for my dear Uncle Rick, I paused, looking into her terrified eyes, and smiled. I'm going to make sure he spits back every single cent he ever took. With interest. 05 that weekend, my mother called me. Her voice was unnervingly calm, almost loving. Ethan, honey, why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? I've invited your uncle and your aunts Linda and Carol. We're all family. Whatever the problem is, we can sit down and talk it out. There's no need to be so distant. Family? Talk it out? I almost laughed. This wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. A setup. A family intervention designed to shame me back into line. They wanted to use guilt and public pressure to make me submit. Fine. Let's see what kind of show my dear family had planned. Okay, I said. I'll be there. On Saturday, I drove out to the old house in the suburbs where I grew up. The moment I walked in, I saw the living room was packed. Aunt Linda and her husband, Aunt Carol and her husband, and a few other distant relatives were all there, crammed onto the sofas and extra chairs. Every single one of them wore an expression of grim righteousness, like a jury ready to convict. And there, in the center of it all, holding court like he owned the place, was my wonderful Uncle Rick. He had his legs crossed, a beer in one hand, telling some loud story. My mother bustled out of the kitchen, carrying a platter of food. She forced a smile that was more like a grimace. Ethan, you're here. Come on, sit down. I didn't sit. I just scanned the room. They really had pulled out all the stops. The meal began, and after a few drinks, the main event started. Rick slammed his beer bottle down on the table with a loud thud. The room fell silent. He glared at me with his bloodshot eyes and fired the first shot. Ethan, I'm going to say this to your face. You think because you've made something of yourself, your wings have grown in, that you can disrespect your own mother and your uncle. Let me tell you something. Without your mother, without me, would you be where you are today? Is this how you treat your elders? You're going to turn your back on your own blood for some woman who married into the family. That was the opening salvo. Aunt Linda immediately jumped in. He's right, Ethan. I hate to say it, but your mother has had it so hard. After your father passed, she raised you all by herself. You have no idea the sacrifices she made. How can you treat her like this?" Aunt Carol added her own passive-aggressive jab. "A man needs to be more generous. You're making great money now, so what's the big deal about helping your uncle out? It's what family does. If you're so stingy with money, who's going to want to be around you?" One after another, my relatives launched their attacks. The message was clear. I was ungrateful, heartless, and cruel. I was the problem. My mother sat beside me, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin and occasionally putting food on my plate, playing the part of the long-suffering mother who still loved her wayward son. It was a masterful performance of family dysfunction. I watched their pathetic theater, saying nothing, eating my food. Finally, when they seemed to have run out of steam, their chorus of complaints dying down, I slowly put down my fork and looked up. "Are you all finished?" My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room and silenced everyone. I stood up, ignoring their accusatory stares, and pulled my phone out of my pocket. "Since you're all so concerned about our family's business, I have something you should hear." I opened an audio file and hit play. Uncle Rick's familiar, grating voice filled the living room. "My nephew's money is my money. What's he going to do about it? His own mother is on my side. You think he's got the guts to go against his mom?" It was the recording from the bank when he was talking to the teller. I called in a favor with a friend who worked there to get the security audio. When the recording finished, the room was utterly silent. Every eye in the place swiveled to stare at Rick. His face went from smug to a deep, blotchy purple. The beer bottle in his hand trembled, and he looked like he was about to have a stroke. I wasn't finished. "All of you," I said, my voice hard, "you say I should help my uncle. Fine. But tell me, where's the line? Yes, I make good money. And when my mother said my uncle needed help with his business, I gave it. Over the years, it's been close to $200,000. And what was the result? My wife is in the hospital needing emergency surgery, and I can't even get $25,000 out of my own account to save her life. Is that what you call family?" I demanded, my voice rising. Before they could answer, I swiped to another screen on my phone. "You said he needed the money for his business. Well, let's see what kind of big business he's been running." I turned the phone around, showing them the bank statements I'd had a private investigator pull. They showed a steady stream of massive wire transfers from my uncle's account directly to accounts associated with several major casinos in Las Vegas. This is his business. He took my money, my father's life insurance money, and poured it all into this bottomless pit. And now he wants another $50,000. The evidence was undeniable. The relatives who had been lecturing me moments before were now speechless. Their expressions shifted from unified indignation to shock and disgust as they looked at Rick. I looked at their changing faces with nothing but contempt. Finally, I stood to leave, my gaze sweeping over every person in the room. "My dad died when I was young. I always looked at you all as my closest family. So I'm going to make this very clear. Anyone who says another word in defense of this gambler, this leech, can forget about ever getting a single dime of help from me for the rest of their lives. The choice is yours." My words were a knife, slicing through the fragile bonds of their so-called family ties. Their loyalty wasn't to blood, it was to my bank account. As expected, the mood turned on a dime. Aunt Linda's husband, who had been nodding along with Rick earlier, was the first to turn on him. "Rick, this is just too much. You've been gambling? Ethan's money doesn't grow on trees, you know." "Yeah, Rick, this isn't right," Aunt Carol chimed in. "Chloe is sick. How could you?" The grand family intervention instantly devolved into a chaotic session of finger-pointing, with Rick as the sole target. My relatives scrambled to distance themselves from him, terrified of being cut off from their future access to my wallet. I watched the chaos for a moment, then grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. Behind me, I could hear my mother's desperate sobs and Rick's furious, cornered animal cursing. I didn't look back. As of today, this dysfunctional circus was no longer my family. 06 after burning that bridge, I devoted all my energy to investigating my father's death. The audio recording I'd sent my mother wasn't just a threat. It was a suspicion that had haunted me for years. I was in college when my dad died. By the time I got the news and rushed home, it was all over. The official police report concluded it was an accident. Driver lost control on wet roads, causing the vehicle to overturn. My mother was inconsolable. My uncle, Rick, the sole passenger and only survivor, had escaped with minor injuries. His account of the crash matched the police report perfectly. At the time, lost in my own grief, I didn't question it. But as I got older, as I watched Rick's endless demands and my mother's spineless compliance, a seed of doubt began to grow. If it was truly a tragic accident, why did Rick show no guilt? Why did he feel so entitled to everything we had? Through an old army buddy of my father's, I managed to track down the retired police officer who had been the lead investigator on the case, a man named Miller. When I explained why I was calling, he was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. Son, that case is over a decade old. It was ruled an accident. I don't think there's anything to be gained by digging it up now. His tone was cautious, reserved. I knew that without concrete evidence, no one would want to touch a cold case. I arranged to meet him at a small coffee shop near his house. I didn't waste his time. I laid the bank statements showing Rick's Las Vegas gambling history on the table between us. Mr. Miller, I know this is a long shot. This isn't just for me. It's for my father. I have reason to believe my uncle was in deep with loan sharks back then. I don't think my father's death was as simple as the report says. I think this money trail shows a motive. That crash might have been less of an accident and more of a payday. Officer Miller stared at the statements, his tired eyes sharp and focused. He lit a cigarette, his expression hardening in the swirling smoke. Finally, he stubbed it out in the ashtray. All right, he sighed. Come with me. He took me to the county records office, to an archive that smelled of old paper and dust. Using his old credentials, we were able to pull the original case file from 15 years ago. The folder was yellowed with age, the typewritten reports faded. The summary was just as I remembered. Driver, Michael Hayes, lost control of vehicle on wet pavement, resulting in a rollover. Deceased at the scene. Passenger, Rick Vance, sustained minor injuries. It all seemed straightforward. But Miller, a man who had spent 30 years reading the language of crash sites, pointed to one of the crime scene photos. Ethan, look here. He indicated two distinct black marks on the asphalt in the photo. Look at these skid marks. They're long and straight. Almost no deviation. That's not what happens when a car hydroplanes or skids out of control. If you lose traction, the tires aren't gripping the road. The marks would be scattered, intermittent, or there wouldn't be any at all. Marks like this, long and straight, look like a driver who was fully conscious and slammed on the emergency brake with everything they had. His words sent a jolt through me. What does that mean? It could mean there was a sudden obstacle in the road, and your father reacted. Or, Miller paused, then voiced a theory that made the hair on my arm stand up. It could mean someone inside the car was fighting him for the wheel, and your father stomped on the brake to try and regain control. My breath caught in my chest. Miller flipped to the next page, the coroner's report. He pointed to a single line. And this, the cause of death. The fatal injury to your father's head is listed as blunt force trauma, not an impact injury consistent with hitting the dashboard or window in a crash. At the time, your mother and uncle claimed your dad must have hit a toolbox that was on the floor of the truck when it rolled. It was a flimsy explanation, but with no other evidence and no witnesses, we had to accept it. Miller sighed and put a hand on my shoulder. Ethan, I'll be honest with you. This case never sat right with me. Your mother and uncle's stories were too perfectly aligned, almost like they'd been rehearsed. But without proof, our hands were tied. Looking at this now, he said, tapping the folder, I'd say we were only scratching the surface. Walking out of the records office, the bright sunlight felt harsh and unforgiving. I clutched the copies of the files in my hand, my fingernails digging into my palm. Blunt force trauma. A fight for the steering wheel. My father's death wasn't an accident. It was a murder. 07. The investigation hit a wall. The skid marks and the coroner's report were suspicious, but they weren't direct proof. To move forward, I either needed to find a murder weapon or get my mother or uncle to confess. The first was nearly impossible, the second even more so. I was pacing restlessly in the hospital hallway when Chloe, who was now able to walk around her room, saw the look on my face. What's wrong? She asked softly. Did you hit a dead end? I tried to smile, not wanting to worry her. It's nothing, just a few loose ends. I gave her the brief version of what I'd found in the police report. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. The room was quiet for a moment, the only sound the gentle beep of the heart monitor. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. "Ethan, I just remembered something," she said, her voice urgent. I leaned in close. "What is it?" "It was the week before your dad's accident. I was over at your house for dinner. After we ate, I overheard your dad and Uncle Rick arguing in the study. It was really heated." "What were they arguing about?" I pressed. I think it was about some old coins," Chloe said, searching her memory. "I was in the living room watching TV, so I didn't hear everything clearly. But I heard your dad yell something like, 'That was my father's collection. It's a family heirloom, and I'll be damned if I'm going to sell it.' Uncle Rick was talking really low, but he sounded desperate, like he was begging. He kept saying things like, 'Mike, just this once you have to help me.' A few minutes later, your dad, he basically threw him out of the house." Coins? A family heirloom? I was 32 years old, and I'd never heard a single word about any coin collection. My mother had certainly never mentioned it. If something that valuable existed, my dad would have told me about it. Unless it was a secret that was directly tied to my father's death. I told Chloe I'd be back and drove straight to the old house, a place filled with childhood memories that now felt tainted and suffocating. My mother wasn't there, probably out complaining to one of her sisters. I went straight to my father's old study. Nothing had changed in 15 years. It was like a time capsule. I started tearing the place apart. Bookshelves, desk drawers under the rug, every conceivable hiding place. Nothing. Just as I was about to give up, my eyes fell on the heavy, dark wood bookshelf my father had built himself. It stood in the corner, solid and imposing. I walked over and knocked on the back panel. It sounded hollow. A hidden compartment. My heart hammered in my chest. With a huge effort, I managed to slide the heavy piece of furniture away from the wall. Behind it, a section of the wallpaper had a faint, almost invisible seam. I pried it open with my fingernails, revealing a small, built-in wall safe. Inside the safe was a single, handcrafted wooden box. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. It was empty. There were no coins. But at the bottom of the velvet-lined box, tucked beneath the lining, was a folded piece of paper. I carefully unfolded it. The paper was yellowed with age, and the text was from a certified appraiser. It was an appraisal certificate. United States Liberty Head Double Eagle Coin Collection, complete set, uncirculated mint condition, circa late 19th century. Provenance verified. Estimated value. When I saw the number at the bottom of the page, all the air left my lungs. The long string of zeros was far more than Rick's gambling debts. This wasn't just money to get out of trouble. This was life-changing, disappear and never be seen again money. In an instant, everything became terrifyingly clear. Rick didn't want to borrow the coins to use as collateral. He wanted to steal them. He wanted to cash them in and keep it all for himself. My dad said no, so it wasn't an accident at all. It was premeditated murder for profit. I stood there in the dusty room, holding that flimsy piece of paper, my hands shaking uncontrollably as a coldness deeper than any I had ever known seeped into my soul. 08, I took the empty box and the appraisal certificate and drove directly to the apartment complex where my mother was now living. She saw me at the door and flinched, a guilty, hunted look in her eyes. I didn't give her a chance to speak. I walked past her and slammed the box and the certificate down on her coffee table. The sound echoed in the small, quiet room. "He killed my father for this, didn't he?" My voice was devoid of all emotion. It was as cold and dead as my heart felt. When my mother saw the familiar box, a violent tremor ran through her body. The color drained from her face, leaving it a waxy, sickly white. "No, it's not true," she shrieked, her voice thin and hysterical. "It's not what you think. It was an accident. It was." Her denials were pathetic. I walked toward her, and with every step I took, she shrank back. "An accident?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "Then where are the coins? Where are they? Did that monster Rick sell them? How much did he get? 100,000? 500,000? More? How much was your cut, Mom? What was your price for helping him cover up my father's murder for 15 years? Every word was a twisting knife. She stumbled backward and collapsed onto the sofa, her eyes wide with terror and despair. She looked at me, and my face so much like my father's, and saw the absolute hatred in my eyes. Her defenses, so carefully constructed for over a decade, finally shattered. A gut-wrenching sob tore from her throat, and she broke down completely. She fell to the floor and grabbed onto my legs, her cries filling the room. No, it wasn't like that. It was an accident. It really was. Under my relentless questioning, she finally choked out the twisted, sanitized version of the truth she had been telling herself for years. She admitted that Rick was being hunted by loan sharks. He knew about the coins and came to my father, begging to use them as collateral. My father refused, and they had a huge fight. On the day of the crash, Rick followed my father and got in the truck with him, pleading with him one last time. When my father again refused, Rick panicked and tried to grab the small satchel where my father kept the collection. They struggled, and in the chaos, the truck veered off the road and crashed. He didn't mean to do it, she sobbed, clinging to her brother's defense. He just wanted the coins. He never wanted to kill your father. Afterward, Rick was terrified. He got on his knees and begged me. He said if the police found out, his life would be over. He would go to prison. Ethan, he's my only brother. He's all I have left. I couldn't just watch him rot in a jail cell. So I told the police it was just an accident. She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara, begging for an absolution I could not give. Selfish, weak, pathetic. To protect her worthless brother, she sacrificed the truth. She sacrificed her dead husband, and she sacrificed her only son. The last ounce of pity I had for her vanished. I pushed her away and stood over her. He never sold the coins, did he? My voice was quiet, but it made her stop crying and stare at me in fresh horror. They're still with him, hidden away. His secret retirement fund. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I saw the answer in her dead, gray eyes. I was right. Good. Rick, your time is up. 09 now that I knew the coins still existed. I could be patient. If I called the cops now, it would be my word against his. There was no physical evidence left. I needed to catch him red-handed. I needed to build a trap he couldn't escape. A plan began to form in my mind. I called my friend Leo. His family was in the high-end art and collectibles business. They had connections everywhere. I told him the whole story. He was so enraged he nearly flipped the table in his office. That son of a bitch and his sister. Ethan, just tell me what you need. I don't care what it costs. We're going to get justice for your dad. I told him to calm down. I didn't need his money. I needed his expertise to help me stage a flawless performance. Leo made a few calls, and everything was set. He arranged for a professional appraiser he trusted, had a sharp young associate of his pose as an assistant to a mysterious Hong Kong billionaire, and booked a private room at an exclusive downtown club. A room he knew was equipped with state-of-the-art, undetectable surveillance cameras. The stage was set. All I needed was for the star of the show to make his entrance. I started by calling my gossipy Aunt Carol. I casually mentioned that I'd recently met a wealthy investor from overseas who was desperately searching for a complete set of Liberty Head Double Eagle coins and was willing to pay a low eight-figure sum for it. I knew that information would get back to Rick before the day was out. The next step was to remove his suspicion. I had my mother call him. She was to tell him that I knew everything about the coins, about the accident. But for her sake and for the memory of my father, I was willing to offer him a way out. He gives me the coins to sell to my contact. We split the money, and we go our separate ways. If he refused, I would go to the police with everything I knew. It was the perfect carrot and stick. On one side, the threat of life in prison. On the other, the lure of millions of dollars, free and clear. For a man as greedy and cowardly as Rick, there was only one choice. Sure enough, Rick called me that afternoon. His voice was a pathetic mix of false humility and twitchy suspicion. Hey, Ethan, your mom told me about what happened back then. I was wrong, kid. I was just a stupid mess. After a few seconds of fake apologies, he got to the point. So this rich buyer, is it for real? I put on a show of being angry and conflicted, arguing with him over the phone. Those were my father's. Why the hell should I split the money with you? Hey, now, let's be fair, he whined. It wasn't like I meant for it to happen. Besides, without me, you'd never be able to sell them for that much, right? A 50-50 split is more than generous. After some theatrical haggling, I reluctantly agreed to a 60-40 split in my favor. We set the meeting for the next afternoon at the downtown club. I hung up the phone and looked out the window as evening fell over the city. The net was closing. I made one last call to retired Officer Miller. Mr. Miller. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. The Regent Club, Private Suite 3. The fish is about to take the bait. 10 on the day of the transaction. I arrived an hour early. Leo's associate, a sharp young man introduced as Mr. Chun, and the elderly, distinguished appraiser, Mr. Albright, were already in the suite. They looked the part perfectly. Miller texted me to confirm his team was in place, undercover, throughout the club. At precisely 3 o'clock, the door opened, and Rick walked in. He was wearing a new, ill-fitting suit, and his hair was slicked back with too much gel. He couldn't hide the desperate, feral greed in his eyes. He scanned the room nervously, his gaze finally landing on me. "So, where are they?" he grunted. I gestured to the two men. "This is Mr. Chun. He represents the buyer. And this is Mr. Albright, our appraiser. He's here to verify the collection." Rick gave a curt nod and placed a beat-up gym bag on the table. From it, he carefully removed a heavy, velvet-wrapped parcel. He unwrapped it slowly, dramatically revealing the collection of gold coins, each nestled in its own slot in a custom case. They glowed under the soft lights of the room. Even Mr. Albright, a man who had seen everything, let out a low whistle of appreciation. He put on a pair of white gloves, picked up a magnifying glass, and began his examination. The only sound in the room was Rick's heavy, anxious breathing. As he worked, Mr. Albright spoke without looking up. "An exquisite collection, Mr. Vance. I assume it's a family heirloom? My client is very particular about provenance. The ownership history must be completely clean." It was the perfect question. Rick, blinded by the millions he thought were just moments away, puffed out his chest. The trap was set, and he walked right into it. "Clean as a whistle," he boasted. "It's been in my family for years. A real shame, too. My idiot brother-in-law, a real tightwad, never wanted to sell it. If he'd just listened to me, I would have been rich years ago. Wouldn't have had to wait until now." The moment the words left his mouth, I hit the stop button on the recording app on my phone, which was sitting on the table. Then I met Rick's gaze and gave a slight nod toward the door. The door to the suite burst open. Miller walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. "Police! Nobody move!" The color drained from Rick's face. His legs gave out, and he crumpled to the floor. The case of coins slipped from his grasp and landed softly on the thick carpet. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and pure hatred. "Ethan, you set me up." I walked over, bent down, and picked up the coin collection, my father's legacy. I looked down at the pathetic man on the floor. "This isn't a setup, Rick," I said, my voice ice cold. "This is a reckoning. My father is watching." In the interrogation room, faced with witness testimony from me, Leo's associate, and the appraiser, physical evidence including the coins and my father's autopsy report, and a crystal-clear audio recording of his own confession, Rick's bravado shattered in less than an hour. He broke down completely, confessing through sobs to the entirety of his crimes from that rainy night 15 years ago. He admitted to fighting with my father over the coins and, in a fit of rage, grabbing a tire iron from the floor of the truck and striking my father in the back of the head. Realizing he'd killed him, he panicked, staged the crash, and, with the help of my mother, concocted the lie they would both live for the next decade and a half. The truth, at long last, was out. 11 on the day of the trial, I took the witness stand. There were 2 people at the defendant's table. One was my uncle, Rick Vance. The other was my mother, Sharon Hayes. For the crimes of second-degree murder and grand theft, Rick was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When he heard the verdict, he collapsed, screaming curses at me, blaming me for ruining his life. My mother, charged with being an accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice, stood beside him. Her hair, it seemed, had turned completely white overnight. She wore a drab jumpsuit, her body hunched and frail. She stared at me with empty eyes, muttering the same thing over and over. "I killed him. I killed your father. I destroyed everyone." When the prosecutor questioned me, I recounted the facts calmly and clearly, from her refusal to pay for Chloe's surgery to her decades-long cover-up of my father's murder. I never once looked at her. I never offered a single word in her defense. Some mistakes are too big to forgive. Family is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. In the end, considering her age and her eventual full confession, The court showed a measure of leniency. She was sentenced to 3 years, suspended, with 4 years of probation. She wouldn't go to prison. But for her, I suspected this was a far worse punishment. She came to see me the day her sentence was handed down. It was the last time we ever spoke. She placed a stack of documents on my table, the deed to the house, all her bank statements, everything. "Ethan," she said, her voice a dry rasp, "this is all yours. It was all your father's. I have no right to it." She looked 20 years older. "I failed you, and I failed your father. I can't face you anymore." I took the documents. They were my inheritance, what was left of my father's life. I was taking back what was mine. I looked at her face, a face I had known my entire life, and felt nothing but the cold emptiness of a stranger. I didn't call her Mom. I just said, "Take care of yourself." Then I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I heard later that she moved back to the old house in the suburbs. She lived there alone, a ghost in an empty house, never seeing anyone. She had lost her brother, she had lost her son, and she had lost the financial security she had valued above all else. She would live out the rest of her days in a prison of her own making, haunted by regret and loneliness. It was the punishment she deserved. 12, I sold the old house and liquidated every asset that tied me to my past life. With the money, I bought a new house in a city on the Southern California coast, a place Chloe had always dreamed of living. A house where you could smell the salt on the sea breeze. Under the warm sun, Chloe's health and spirit returned. She was vibrant and full of life again. We started talking about having a child. I requested a transfer to my company's West Coast office and made my family my priority. I turned down unnecessary travel, left the office on time every day, and came home to cook dinner and walk on the beach with my wife. On weekends, we drive up the coast, exploring small towns and staying in quiet inns. Life was simple, and it was good. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The heavy chains of obligation, the suffocating toxicity I had mistaken for love, were finally broken. My world felt clean and bright and full of hope. A year later, on the anniversary of my father's death, I went to visit his grave. I brought Chloe with me and our newborn son. The headstone was clean, the engraving clear. My father's picture still smiled its kind, honest smile. I didn't bring a phone to record a message this time. I didn't have any more heavy words to say. I held my son, a beautiful, perfect little boy, and gently placed his tiny, soft hand on the cool stone of the marker. "Dad," I said softly, "this is your grandson. His name is Andy. It's all over now. You can rest in peace." Chloe leaned her head on my shoulder. The three of us stood there quietly, looking at my father smile, and we smiled back. The sun was setting over the hills, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. The future was here. It was a new beginning, and it was ours.